Hey, this is Dan from MusicXplorer. We're here today with Bill Tuli. He's a guitarist and an author. He's written books on Fender amps and Stratocasters and Telecasters. In his current book, Stratocasters and Telecasters, a love story, he discusses his personal experiences with Stratocasters and Telecasters, as well as the hardware, comparing both, and technical data. He also talks about the years Strats and Tellies were released and their current value today. Not only is the book filled with great information, but there's a lot of pictures of the Strats and Tellies that he's come across with. I mean, it's just great. It's just a lot of stuff in here. So if you're a Fender person that likes Telecasters, Stratocasters, or Fender amps, I recommend you get this book. It's good. So how you doing today, Bill?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in Phoenix. 70 degrees. I don't know what it is where you guys are, but it's about 70 degrees.
I'm 30 minutes from New York City, so it's not so bad. That's a great backdrop you have there. That's killer.
This is where I sit all morning.
Before we talk about your book, let's get some history on you. You were a nuclear engineer in the Navy, and then you moved on, but you've always been a musician, and now you're an author. So give us some history on yourself.
Well, I started out like most kids, growing up playing guitar, and when I was young, I joined the Navy. And one of the things if you know anything about me, you know that I started collecting my vintage guitars while I was in the Navy. Right. And I talk about it in the book, like, most sailors blow their money on women and booze. I blew it on vintage guitars. That was my thing.
So your first book came out in 2019, right? Naked and Dying.
Yeah.
So, and then then the latest book just came out this year. So there's not much of a gap between writing both books.
No. In fact, this COVID shutdown, I wrote 5 books.
Really? So I guess let's get down to your book here. What is the main difference between a Stratocaster and a Telecaster?
Like the Telecaster, what really defines that sound is that rear pickup, that rich pickup. And you got through strings coming through the back that are anchored in the back of a light ash body. They bend over up to 3 brass saddles that are heavy, they're very massive. And they go over this pickup, which is basically wound for a pedal steel originally, right? An old Champ pedal steel. And then they basically go straight through to a straight inline pull. And so you have this rock hard maple neck that's thick, screwed to this lightweight ash body. They started this about 1949, and then it took about a year to get that broadcaster just right. And so, they rushed it to market. There were a lot of things Fender still wanted to do. He still wanted to work on that pickup. Like I said, he was just using the one they were winding for that Champ. He wanted to work on using compensated pole heights and things like that. So and one of the first things that happened was people loved that Telecaster, but they, he started getting feedback right away. Well, it's a big plank. Why don't we contour it out? Why don't we do this? Why don't you do this? So he listened to these musicians, his guinea pigs, as he called them, the guys that took these guitars out. And he basically wanted to obsolete that Telecaster before his competitors did. So he put everything into the Stratocaster that he really, if he had time, he would have done for the Telecaster. And in his mind, the Stratocaster was basically just going to replace the Telecaster. Nobody was going to buy the Telecaster anymore. They would buy the Stratocaster. And the biggest difference between the two, again, we talk about this rear pickup. There's not that sustain that you get from having through body stringing, but he has this tremolo arm. But it's like that took a year to perfect. So they basically have this massive steel block, inertia block, but he also now instead of having 2 strings on a saddle, he now has individual. So now you can finally intonate something perfectly. So now your Stratocaster, but it has 3 pickups. That was the big thing. Like, hey, 2 pickups are great. Let's outdo the others and do 3. The tremolo arm was a big selling point, and the contoured body was a huge selling. So that's the big difference between the Stratocaster and the Telecaster. Everything else is pretty much the same.
So let's go back to more of your book there. You also talk about the years of the Strats and Tellies. So talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I don't know, there must be like 10 books that you can find. I have every book ever written about Stratocasters and Telecasters. And one of the things is that nobody ever really puts into, they talk about different things, but nobody ever really sat down and said, year to year to year to year, how did it change? You know what I mean? And that was what I like I said, I kind of did this for my own research.
So another thing, cool part of your book is, you got so many pictures of all your guitars and other people's guitars, and there's not only have the pictures, you describe them, what they meant to you and everything. So what made you want to put that into the book?
Well, this like I say, actually what happened was I did Naked and Dime because I really wanted to understand my Fender amps. So that Naked and Dime was basically me just doing a research paper that turned into a book because, why not, but when we had all my guitars, my wife was actually helping me bring everything in, and she asked me point blank, she says, how many guitars do you have? So I told her, I think she asked me, like, why do you need that many guitars? And I said, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know why most of them are Stratocasters and Telecasters. And in this book, I answer that question, and that's why I wrote this book, because I wanted to find out myself. In the book, I go through each era because it's kind of interesting, because most people just don't understand the wiring of Fenders at all.
And I think your book is really interesting because you cover those different avenues. I mean, you cover, like you just said, you're describing each year, which is, I think that anybody that wants to understand Stratocasters, Telecasters should buy the book, period. I mean, it's a pretty...
Oh, yeah. And I try to do that. Like, I try to explain, like, there's a reason why you're going to love this guitar. And here's the reasons. There's a physical reason. There's physics involved. If you look at the back of this book, I spend almost 100 pages talking about the values
right.
And Strat will sound different. Each Strat will have a different feel and a different sound. Telecaster's not.